Hello, my friend, and welcome to Book Talks with Keith. I'm Keith Brown. So very glad you could join me for this exciting episode. And I have brought to you another guest, and this is an award-winning author, and I am so very pleased to invite her to the podcast. This is Sheryl Bass. Sheryl, welcome to Book Talks with Keith.
Thank you so much for having me.
Well, I appreciate you coming on. And just listener, I'm just going to tell you, Cheryl and I had a little bit of trouble getting this set up. We had some issues with Zoom. So anyway, I thank you for your patience. And I believe that we're going to have a wonderful discussion. So to start with, and I know if you've been on other podcasts, every podcaster is going to say, okay, tell us who you are and all about you. And I get that. But truly, when it comes to authors, I think it's really important because it gives life and breath and meaning to the work we do when people get the chance to know a little bit about us as people. So I want you to just share a little bit with me and with my listener. Who is Cheryl Lewis?
Okay, great. Well, I have master's degrees in social work and journalism, and I use both of those to inform my picture book writing. I'm a children's picture book author. I have two picture books out now. One of them is Baby Dragon's Big Sneeze, and the sequel is Baby Dragon Finds His Family. And let's see. The first book, I was walking down the street about 17 years ago, and I sneezed really hard. And I had the ridiculous thought that it's a good thing I'm not a dragon because if I were, this would have done a lot of damage. And then I thought, well, this sounds like a picture book. So I went home and I wrote a first draft, put it away, didn't do anything with it. And then about 5 or 6 years ago, I tried to get it traditionally published, sent it to a lot of agents and publishing houses, and unfortunately, I wasn't getting any interest. And then I decided to self-publish it and found someone named April Cox who has a company called Self-Publishing Made Simple. And she walks you through the process. She'll get on a Zoom call with you and she will help you get the ISBN code, which is like the little UPC symbol on the back of the book. And she'll help
Mhm.
you file with the Library of Congress. And she has vendors that she works with, like editors and illustrators and so on. And so I really thought I'd be completely on my own with self-publishing, but that's sort of a misnomer. There's a whole tribe of people that can help you.
There
So,
are, yeah.
so I really enjoy the process.
Well, that's wonderful. And you did the writing, but I think someone else did the illustrations. Is that correct?
Yes, yes. So Ramesh Ram is the illustrator. And the way that came about is, like I said, April has several illustrators she works with. So she had about 12 that
Hmm.
do what's called work for hire, which
Right.
means that the author can have the rights to the characters after the book is published, which is important because if I ever want to have stuffed animals or something of that nature, I then can own the characters.
Right.
So she had these 12 illustrators. I looked through their websites. I was able to eliminate some of them and narrow it down to my top four. And then she said, okay, why don't you have them all draw the same image from the same scene in your book and then just in black and white, and, pay them each about $50 and then compare them and then limit it down from there. And so then I was able to limit it down to two, my top two. And then I used my friends and family as a focus group, especially those that had kids, and said, which dragon do you think is cuter and why? Which little girl looks better and so on. And that's how I found my illustrator.
Nice. That's great. That's great. And it's good to have that resource because a lot of times people, you're on your own trying to find all these connections. So I'm really glad that she had those for you.
Mhm.
What I hear, I understand what you said you got the inspiration and that time you're walking down the street, but how does a person go from a journalism master's and social work and all this to go, you know what? The light bulb comes on. I read a children's book. I mean, are you a parent? Have you shared things with kids? I mean, how did this happen?
Hmm. I'm not a parent, but it was in my brain and I had a sentence or two, a beginning was forming in my head. And so I just had to start jotting it down. A rhyming couplet was forming. And so it's like I was giving birth and I had to just go ahead and let the process happen. And
Right.
so I had never published a children's picture book before. I'd published some other things. I'd published some personal essays in anthologies. There's a personal essay I wrote about a dog of mine that I had several years ago that starred in Boulder Dinner Theater's production of Wizard of Oz and what it was like to be a stage mom to a dog that played Toto um, for 5 months. And so that got published in a couple of anthologies. So that was, but throughout my life, whenever there was a friend or family member that had a birthday or something of that nature, I would always write little poems to them. Growing up, my sister and I both sing. And so we would take songs and change the words to them and make them funny about, we would harmonize and make them about people's birthdays or whatever the occasion was. So that was always a part of who I was growing up and so on.
That's really neat. And now I'd be honest with you, I've never written a children's book. So it's got to have its own sense of challenge there because, you realize you've got these little ones and you first of all you got to get through the parent who's got to go, okay, this is something I want my child to read or not. Then you got to take it to another level and go, okay, now how can I make this with a child likes it? So
Mhm.
what gave you I mean, did you just think this is such a good idea that they're going to love it, or did you get opinions, or is just something you say, well, I'm going to give it a shot and see what happens?
The latter. I was gonna just give it a shot and see what happened. And as I was writing it, I was chuckling to myself, and I thought, this is sort of funny. This is amusing. I think parents might find this funny and cute. The premise and the way, some of it was executed, I think, is funny. And I did get a little discouraged as I started to get the rejection letters because pretty much um, every publishing house that accepts picture books in the US, Canada, any English speaking country has heard from me. They received my story and the same thing with agents as well. But I then decided, you know what, I'm not going to just let this go. I'm going to go ahead and try and self-publish it.
Well,
So.
and there's nothing wrong with that because we live in the age today where self-publishing, whether it's books, whether it's music,
Mhm.
the times have changed, and
Yes.
there are many books, as you probably know, I'm sure with your experience, that you know Harry Potter may never have been published if some of those traditional agents and folks had their way that
Mm.
gave her the rejections, so many of those rejections.
Mhm.
So I understand that process. I remember 20 some years ago doing the same thing with my first book back then, and I remember those, and they're hard to get because you start going, is this something that's not any good, or
Mm.
but I'm glad that you didn't give them the final say because
Mhm.
I know that this book has won some awards, right?
Yes. Yes.
Please
So
share that
my
with the
first book,
audience.
I'm sorry.
Share it with us. Tell us what kind of awards it's received.
So the first book got 11 uh, national and international book awards,
Wow.
and the second book got about seven so far. So and the first book got four or five of those were first place. So out of thousands and thousands of entrants.
Hmm.
So that was very validating
Yeah, I would think
to
so.
finally get these awards
Yeah.
and the sales have been very good as well, and also the reviews. So on Amazon, for example, they're both on Amazon. Um, the first book has a 4.8 uh, out of 5 stars, and it's got something like 290 some odd reviews.
That's really
And
good.
the second book has about 160 reviews and has 4.9 as the
Wonderful.
average score. So people seem to really enjoy it, parents and kids alike. So that's very validating.
Yeah, those are good. Those are good numbers. And so, and if you're listening right now, I just want you to hear that because I tell people a lot of times if you're reading books, especially if you bought a book through Amazon and you enjoyed the book, I know sometimes it's a pain. I know it takes a little bit of your time, but the fact that you do take the time to give it a good rating and a positive word means so much in the whole industry. It means a lot to the author because, like Cheryl can attest to, it gives us encouragement. Also, it does help the algorithm, even on Amazon, to push it out to more potential buyers. So, it is that important. And I think sometimes people don't realize how much of a say and how much of a part they play in the success of authors like, you in this book. And so I'm grateful for all those people who took the time to do that. So, with that said, let's just dive a little bit, if we can, into the two books because
Okay.
I think especially when you're dealing with children's books, I think that the message behind them is so critical. And I think for parents to hear this and go, okay, that's a subject that I like, the characters and all that, the kids will warm up to, but I really want the parents to hear what the message is behind these books so they can understand.
Right. Well, like I mentioned earlier, I have a master's degree in social work. So it was important to me for the books to have social emotional learning messages in them. And SEL, or social emotional learning, is really the kinds of soft skills that employers look for in adults. Is this person a team player? Can this person take responsibility and apologize when they've done something wrong? Those are those kind of things that we look for in adults. And it's much easier to teach that kind of things to someone when they're a child in a way that's palatable and entertaining and enjoyable than it is to, give those messages to someone once they're already an adult. So that was important that both of the books have messages about teamwork, sharing, forgiveness, accountability, um, friendship, those found family. That's another.
Yeah, I was going to say the second volume has a lot to do with family, right?
Yes.
With family unit or relationships, I think.
Yes. So the second book is particularly good for kids that are either adopted or come from a blended family, um, or have a non-traditional family structure. Because, well, spoiler alert for any parents that are listening, I'll tell the ending. Basically, the dragon goes on a quest to try and find other dragons like him. And he does not find other dragons, but he comes to realize that the people that he's been living with all along, the villagers, have been his family. That's his found family. And so that's why it can be particularly helpful for kids that are either adopted or, um, have a different type of family structure.
Absolutely a beautiful thing because we do see this so often, especially with the numbers of divorce these
Yes.
days. There's a lot of that, and having years in a classroom, I know I see a lot of those dynamics in my past. So I think that's great. I think that uh, there's great messages in that. I also know that you mentioned something earlier, and I don't want to miss this because I think it's significant, um, that you use rhyme, and not every child's book does,
Right.
but you have purposely chosen to use rhyme. You mentioned a little bit about where that comes from in yourself with your sister early on, your
Mhm.
singing and all that. But why use rhyme? Why did you think that was so important to your work?
Okay. Well, it's actually kind of interesting because I found that when I was getting rejection letters from some of the agents and also from the publishing houses, some of them said, we don't like rhyme, we don't do rhyme. So certain things go in and out of fashion in book publishing, whether it's children's books or adult books or whatever. And so, I mean, I don't know if Dr. Seuss would have had a hard time nowadays if he had been trying to publish his books today. But I think rhyme is very important. I've read that it helps kids with language acquisition. It helps kids who are reluctant readers. They can anticipate what the next word is going to be, and so on. So there's a lot of positives to rhyme. In fact, that's why nursery rhymes are so prevalent in childhood. So it's interesting. It shows that a lot of these publishing houses and things are not run by people who have an education background necessarily or a social work background. or they would probably be a little more in favor of rhyme. But that's why I chose rhyme.
Info. Yeah, they're most often they're driven by business. These are business people that are making these decisions, not social workers. You're right.
Right, right.
Well, that's wonderful. And so, when did the first book come out?
2022. So,
2022.
and that was another reason that I wanted the book to be, I went ahead and chose to self-publish it was my father was very ill. And
Mm,
I knew that with traditional publishing, it can take like 5 years from the time a publishing house
yes.
says, "Oh, we like your book," till you actually see it on the shelf in print. And so I wanted to go ahead and get this done, and I wanted my father to be able to hold the book in his hands. Unfortunately, the book published on October 19th, 2022, and he passed away on September 4th. So he missed it by just a few weeks, but
Oh,
he was
I'm
able to
sorry.
see it. Yeah, thank you. He was able to see it in black and white. He just didn't get to see the illustrations in color and put together as a book completely, but it's dedicated to him.
It was just out of my own curiosity, because again, this is an area that I have not put my feet in. Now, my sister has actually published a children's book, but I have not ever done that. And I'm just curious, for your experience, was the color aspect of it, did that make the process more difficult, or was it pretty much the same, do you think, as more traditional black and white publishing?
Um, I think the coloring of it definitely added to it. The way that this was done was they sent me sketches, and everything was done via email because they were. It took a village to make my book. So my mentor, April Cox, is in Rhode Island. I live in Illinois. My web designer is in the Philippines, and my illustrator is in India. So a lot was done via email and internet. And he would send me the illustrations as attachments, and he would send them as just black and white renderings. And then once I approved them and I liked what the villagers are wearing and I liked what the dragon looked like and so on, then we added the color. And I told him I had a lot of another thing I really like about self-publishing is I had a lot of creative control. I was able to
Yes, you
tell
do.
him exactly what facial expressions I wanted on the dragon, what I wanted the people to be wearing, what's happening in each scene, all of that. And if I had traditionally published, they would have chosen all of that. The publishing house would have chosen my illustrator, and whether I liked it or not, this is your dragon. This is, but with this, I got to really world build, and just kind of create my own realm, both with my words and with the illustrations. So,
It's great freedom in that, because my first book, I had no control over the cover, and to this day, I hated it. And
mm,
so when that book went out, when that contract went out, I republished it myself, and
mm,
I actually photographed the new cover myself. So
mm,
I understand what you're saying. It
hmm
does give you a lot more personal ability to have some say in it. Plus the fact that, unless you get some huge contract, self-publishing, it works out better financially sometimes for authors, because you're not having to split it multiple ways in the income. So, there's a lot of positive things. So I say this to just simply say, if you're listening to Sheryl and you're listening to me right now and you go and, I've just dreamed or thought about writing a book, whether it's a children's book or whether it's a fiction like I write or nonfiction. Um, Sheryl, what would you tell that person?
definitely go for it.
Mm,
You really have nothing to lose, and it's such a special feeling to be able to see your book in print. And now with things like print on demand, you don't have to have 4,000 books in your basement, and have to
yeah,
try and find a way to sell them. You don't have to have
that's
all this
right.
inventory.
Yeah,
People order them as they want them. And then you also have a legacy. You have something that you can show to your friends and family, and also a possible another income stream. So I think it's just a wonderful And I have a third book that's ready to go that hopefully will come out sometime this later this year.
Is it in the same series?
Yes,
Oh, nice,
if
nice.
something else happens to my dragon. So
Oh, yeah, that's really cool. And and folks, if even adults, when you're adults and you read series of of fiction books like a series, or even in children's books, there's something to be said about series because people enjoy the character, they get familiar with them, they want to follow the journey. So that just makes it more exciting and more interesting for not only you because you get to bring more people along in the journey, but for your audience to fall in love with this little dragon.
yes,
I think you know I can imagine kids just falling, hugging the book and just falling in love with that little dragon and talking to mom and dad about the little dragon. So um, that's gotta that's gotta warm your heart beyond measure, I would think.
it really does. And so I read every review. When you talk about reviews, I've read every review on Goodreads and Amazon and all of that. And it does really warm my heart. And some people have sent me photos of their kids holding the books, and so that's just really lovely.
It really is a special thing, especially when people do, So there's another little request, guys. If you're reading, Cheryl's book or my books or anybody else's books, don't, we live in this social media day today. So take a picture of that book, you with the book, and post it and tag that person in your post. It would mean the world to that author to see you do that, right, Cheryl? Would you agree with that?
Absolutely. Authors are
Yeah.
people too.
Yeah, exactly. We like a little positive affirmation once in a while too, don't we?
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely.
So so tell me back on the day that you go to the, and I know this is probably what happened. You go to your mailbox or you go to your front stoop and you reach down and you pick up a box, you bring it into your home, you open it up and you pick up that first book for the first time. Tell me about that feeling.
Wow. I couldn't believe that it had actually come to fruition, that here I was holding this book that was something that was just in my head from 15 years earlier, and that, it came to that. It became this tangible thing. It's really kind of addictive. And even the whole process, every time I would get an email from my illustrator, it was like Christmas, opening up the attachment to see, okay, what are the people shaping up like? What is everyone looking like? And how are they interacting on the page? What is this looking like? Um, so yeah, it's just a really addictive process, and I want to keep writing more books about the dragon, but also about other characters too.
Well, and that was going to be my next, and I agree with you. It is addictive. It's and for me, it's healing because it's a way of me to express in my writing and all this kind of stuff. But I was going to ask you, do you see yourself basically always writing this kind of material? The children's books, this series, or do you see that expanding at some point now that you're on your author journey?
I have another children's picture book idea. Well, it's been fleshed out. It's been written and it has been edited. So it's ready to go in terms of the text. The illustrations have not been done yet. But that
Mhm.
was based on a troubled dog that I had named Asher. Um, and how we got him to do some agility, and how agility work really helped him kind of come out of his shell and become a more behaved, better doggy citizen, so to speak. So that's another children's book that will hopefully um, come out soon. Um, so I have a few others that are children's book ideas. I would love to someday do a novel. I really admire people who can do that length of work. I think my journalism background makes it a little bit hard to get over that hump, because in journalism school, I learned if you can't say something in 500 words or less, it's not worth saying.
Right.
So I'm so brief that the children's book genre suits my journalistic
Right.
kind of sensibilities really well. So it would be really a departure for me to wax poetic about a tree for a page or, something of that nature. So, but it would be good to stretch myself in that way. I think that would be good.
It really is an adjustment because I write nonfiction and fiction, so I've published both, and it is quite mind-numbing
Mm,
sometimes what you have to do to get those done.
mm,
And yes, mine's academic background in education and stuff. So that was, like you said, very pointed, very professional, very, straight to the point. And then fiction is just an imaginative journey, and
mm.
it is so different. But I find, like I said earlier, I find it healing. So I really enjoy doing it. It's almost therapeutic for me. So, and I'm sure that this is to you in some ways.
Yeah,
So, Cheryl, I've really enjoyed this conversation. I hope
me
that you
too.
felt comfortable. Is there anything that you would like to, that we haven't covered, or anything you'd like to say? Certainly, I want to give people a chance to hear the titles again and make sure they know. I'll make sure the links are in the show notes that you can find the books, folks, because I know you're probably going, I've got a child that would be interested in that, or I've got a niece or nephew that might be interested in this. And I know there's some of you listening, so we're going to make sure the links are there. But is there anything else that you'd like to share with the listener, Cheryl?
Well, yeah. So to find my books, they are on Amazon, Baby Dragon's Big Sneeze and Baby Dragon Finds His Family, but you can also find them less for a less of a cost through my website, which is be-kindpublishing.com. Be Kind Publishing with a hyphen between the BE and the kind. And it's a little bit a few dollars less through my website. And you can watch podcast interviews, and you can also get up to 10 free coloring pages for your kid. You can, put in your email address and then print out the 10 free coloring pages if you go to my website. So,
Nice, nice. Well, I hope that some folks will do that. Well, thank you so much for being on the podcast. I really do appreciate it. And if you will hang on a few moments after, we'll do a little bit of housekeeping together once I sign off here. Is that okay?
okay, great. Thank you so much again.
You're welcome, Cheryl. Listener, thank you so much for tuning in to this episode of Book Talks with Keith. It is my joy to talk all things books. I mean, whether it's reading books, whether it's writing books, whether it's like Cheryl was talking about the process of publishing books, whatever it is, let's just lift up the art of literature. Whatever genre it is. So, thank you so much for your time. I look forward to having you on the next episode of Book Talks with Keith. Until then, make it a great